All right, we are live on air. Hello, everybody. How is everyone doing out there? If you hear me, let me know in the live chat. I am here with the one and only, the man, the myth, the legend in Moscow, Mr. Peter Lavelle, host of RT's Crosstalk. And we have the all-knowing Oracle of London, Mr. Alexander Mercouris.
Otherwise known as the London Eye.
The London Eye, yes. Guys, how is everyone doing? If you can hear me in this live chat, please send us a message in the chat. And we have a lot of news to get to, a lot of news that's going on, everything from Cohen building hotels in Moscow to Clinton investigations to Ukraine barring men aged 16 to 60 from entering Ukraine. And of course, we have Assange, G20, Brexit. And okay, everyone can hear us. Great. Let's get to it. One of the first questions that we have on the chat, Peter, before we got started was from Eric. And he asks, I don't recall seeing a Duran video saying anything critical of Russia Putin. What mistakes, if any, have Russia Putin made recently?
Recently, I would start out with, well, I think a much more broader mistake, or a mistake that's being alleviated finally, is that when I moved here 20 years ago, there was always this lamentation that, you know, Russia's too dependent on the oil economy, natural resources. And, you know, that was talked about for the first 8 years that I lived here. And then the financial crisis of 2008, and then the kind of bubbles that have occurred since then, has really made Russia change the orientation of its economy. It's putting a lot more focus on agriculture. It is the largest exporter of grain in the world now. That wasn't the case 20 years ago. As a matter of fact, 20 years ago, it was a basket case. I think dealing with pension reform could have been done better and faster. I think Russia's foreign policy vis-a-vis Ukraine, particularly in 2014, Russia was asleep at the wheel. They should have seen what was going on, the type of groups that were agitating for power, and their connections to the West. They were asleep at the wheel, and everyone is paying the cost for that now. So. I could talk a lot about domestic issues. I don't know if that really means much to people. I think that the Russian political party system hasn't really gone anywhere, and I think it really needs to. There's no conservative party here, and the party of power, United Russia. It's a kind of a blasé big tent party, and it doesn't really have an identity. The Communist Party is really the only real political party in the country, okay? But they don't really seem to have much ambition for power. They have a leadership that's been around for a quarter of a century, and they're kind of happy with their perks and stuff like that. That doesn't mean that it isn't much more competitive on a local level, because it is, and I think that's where real politics happens. But in the national parliament, it's I don't really follow it. It's not very interesting. Nothing much happens. So there's a lot of little things like that. I think the President Medvedev, when he was president, he made the cardinal mistake of abstaining on the Libya vote. I think the whole world is paying a price for that right now. So there's a lot of things, okay. So, and I'm glad the question is asked, okay, because we're never asked that, okay. And once it's asked, we give a straight answer. Alexander Mercouris, I hand it over to you.
Well, I mean, this is a thing, because of course what we tend to discuss on these programs inevitably tends to be foreign policy. If you actually look at what we write about, what I say and what Peter says and what I write about economic and domestic policy, we have many things that we can criticize. I mean, I have been a consistent critic of the Russian government's monetary policy. I think it is far too tight. I think it has restricted growth. I think it has slowed the improvement in living standards. And of course, there is still very great inequality as a result of all of that in Russia. I think that there are issues with taxation, which we could talk about. I mean, I personally believe Russia should be moving more towards a progressive income tax situation, which they've been talking about many times that they haven't done, and they always run away from this. I mean, there are lots of things we could say here. We could talk about the way laws are made. We could talk about the party system. Peter has actually got that absolutely right. There is great dissatisfaction in Russia about the very stagnant political system there, where, as I said, political parties have not really formed. The Communist Party is the only party, and it is becoming increasingly a fossil. So there's lots of things we could say about Russia.
And also one of the things too is that, you know, the encouraging entrepreneurship. Okay, I mean, because starting up a business is difficult. It's complicated. There's a lot of paperwork.
Yeah.
It's better than it was a decade, 15 years ago, but they could go further because there's a lot of entrepreneurial spirit here to be tapped into. I mean, I know this personally. I know young people, you know, late 20s, you know, they've started up their own business, and, you know, half the job is getting, you know, making sure all the paperwork is done, you know, instead of running their business and growing the economy. So you know, it's those kind of things that, you know, you see on a daily basis. And I'm glad that Alexander Mercouris talked about income inequality, because it is a serious problem here. It's really shameful to see people that the generation that rebuilt the Soviet Union after the Second World War, you know, they basically go to the store and pay with pennies. Okay, it's a disgrace.
But as I said, we don't tend to get asked these questions very much, because the focus inevitably on our programs is on foreign policy. And can I just say about foreign policy, I mean, foreign policy in Russia has undergone a very great shift. Because if you're talking about the period of the early Putin years, then there was every desire for a very strong rapprochement with the West. That has reversed, not because that was a change of wish in Russia, but because Western policy forced it to change. You can argue that the Russians themselves were too slow in understanding that, and that has had implications. I mean, Peter has mentioned the Libya vote at the Security Council, which Medvedev passed. Medvedev was very anxious to maintain good relations with the United States and with the West, and he agreed to do what Barack Obama wanted.
Well, he believed the West, stupidly.
He believed the West. So, I mean, you know, but as I said, since the focus of our programs tends to be geopolitics and foreign policy, that's obviously what we talk about. And do we have no criticisms of Russian foreign policy? Of course we do. But I see our role primarily to explain Russian foreign policy, given that in the West it is explained so badly.
All right, Alexander Metro wants to know if the Duran is on the Russian government payroll. Is the Duran on the Russian government payroll, Alexander?
Absolutely not in any way. I mean, you know,
and on that note, guys, a lot of our videos recently are getting demonetized. So if you buy a T-shirt, it really helps out a lot. You can go to the Duran shop. You can also donate to our PayPal and Patreon page, and I promise you that money does not go to the Russian government. That money helps us create these videos and these shows for you. Thank you for all your questions and all your support. Alexander, can we knock out some quick Brexit questions before all of us get into one of the stories that broke, which is the Ukraine story, that they're banning the Russian men from entering the Ukraine? And then I know there's a lot of interest in the G20, in Cohen and Assange and all this other stuff that's going on. So a couple of quick questions on Brexit for you, Alexander, from our viewers. From S. Bennett, do you think Farage is right to criticize Gerard Baton's UKIP?
Yes, actually, I think that I have to say, I think Farage himself is partly responsible for the crisis in UKIP, because of course he quit as its leader when in fact he was most needed. I mean, he didn't stay after the referendum to see it through. But I think that UKIP has practically disintegrated at a time when it is needed most. And I think the leadership of UKIP has been a walking disaster area. I mean, they've had one change after another, and now it is shifting so far to the right that I think it's going to be, bringing in people like Tommy Robinson, I think it's going to be a real problem for many people in Britain, given that it is now moving far further to the right than I think most people in Britain are comfortable with. But my own guess is that sooner or later, Farage will recreate his political movement. It may not be UKIP, it may be something else, but it is Farage that we need to watch.
All right. And from Alfred, another Brexit UK question. As a UK citizen who is socially conservative, what are my options politically? The Conservative Party are dedicated to multiculturalism, progressivism, and UKIP are a failed party. So can you answer that question?
You have no political options, because you're absolutely right. I mean, can I explain to those of our viewers who are not British? I mean, it was the Conservative government of David Cameron which insisted on gay marriage, on legalizing gay marriage, not gay civil partnerships, but gay marriage. So there is actually no political vehicle in Britain at the moment for socially conservative people. That is, I think, an issue, because, of course, I believe, whatever one's views about these things, that people should be represented and should have their ability to express their views politically. But I mean, the only parties that tend to take these views now are the Northern Irish parties, and there are problems with them, and they don't campaign in mainland Britain anyway.
All right, and Peter, I know that this is a topic that you like to discuss because it doesn't get much play in mainstream media, and it's a question from Barney Google, who says, will the Senate stop U.S. support of the war in Yemen?
No, they won't stop it. You know, the Al Jazeera, of all people, came out with an article a few hours ago citing a number of senators that received financial contributions. Maybe I should say the real word, bribes, to not pursue a resolution there. It is so shameful. It is so shameful what is going on here. It's unbelievable. And it shows they talk about Russian meddling in American politics. My God, the Israelis, the Saudis, the Emirates, all these countries meddle intensely in the American political system, and they get their way. My goodness, we should all feel disgraceful. This can be taken care of. This can come to an end, or it can be slowed down. It can be slowed down with a phone call. I'm serious. It makes you want to give up on hope. It really, and I do it a lot on Crosstalk, particularly on the Bullhorn segment. I always try to talk about Yemen, because I will not let that story fade away because special interests don't want to talk about it. It's a disgraceful situation that is allowed to go on. Oh, it's Iran's fault. Oh my God. Okay, really? I mean, you have people like Pompeo and Bolton are so disingenuous. They're just flat out liars. Okay, and then you look at the U.S. State Department just in the last day or so, more threatening language towards Iran. So that means get Yemen off the front page, get Saudi off the front page. I mean, this is so manipulative, and it's propaganda. That's why we do these podcasts.
And obviously, yeah, they don't want to talk about Yemen, but and interference by Saudi and Israel and the Emirates in the U.S. democracy. But they are talking, Peter, a lot about Michael Cohen looking to build a hotel in Moscow. Can you get into that story and what's going on?
Get into
that a little bit, Peter, because I really want to hear your viewpoints on that.
I think most people know that Donald Trump was a real estate mogul before he ran for president. It was business as usual. I think the biggest revelation, I suppose, is that, Cohen is kind of a buffoon. Trump surrounds himself by these people that, Paul Manafort, people like that. I mean, they got sticky fingers. They're really kind of they compromise on the truth all the time. They're very self-serving. They're vain. Okay, so what? He was talking about building a hotel. There's nothing illegal about that. And now you get into liar's paradox. What does he say that's true? I mean, because I always tell the truth. That's a lie. Okay, it's It's a story. It is just a cudgel to beat on Trump. You know, I'd like to beat on Trump for other reasons, okay? Real reasons, okay? This is ridiculous. Ridiculous. He lied. Oh, I can't remember. Oh, here's the truth. What does that have to do with the 2016 election? Can someone explain that to me? 2 years of this nonsense. What does it have to do with the election? None of it. None of these stories. Okay? You're going after a 72-year-old man, Jerome Corsi. What is disgraceful, shameful behavior? No, he won't lie. So he might face imprisonment and probably bankruptcy. What kind of judicial system is that? This is ridiculous. When I saw the Cohen story, I just thought, very convenient. That's when Trump is at G20. Okay, it's just like when Mueller did his indictment of these kids. You know, when Trump went to Helsinki. You know, this total obstruction at every single turn. When Donald Trump is the most anti-Russia president policy-wise since the Cold War. Get your head around that, guys.
Yeah, what do you make of the timing of that, Alexander? Peter is exactly right. In Helsinki, Mueller did the same thing. He's doing the same thing now as Trump goes to G20, and Trump has announced. First, we said that there was announcements from the Kremlin side. There was going to be a meeting between Putin and Trump. Now Trump has called that off. What do you make of the timing? Mueller, I mean, the guy is as deep state as you can get. And I find it hilarious that you have these SJWs and the liberal left and all these people, you know, talking about the integrity of Mueller and the integrity of Mueller. The guy is about as deep state as you can get, Alexander.
Well, can I first of all say that I agree with everything that Peter said, and moreover, you and I have done a video on this subject, which will be coming out, I think, fairly soon, in which we say all the same things that Peter has said, except, of course, that we had no collusion with Peter beforehand, because we see these problems. We've gone through, we've unpacked in detail the Corsi story, the Cohen story, all of these things, and we've shown that they have no bearing whatsoever on the collusion allegations, and the sum total of Cohen's story, even if it is true, which I do not know, is that a deal to build a hotel in Moscow was cancelled in June as opposed to January. And I just cannot understand what the importance of that is. Anyway, put all that aside. Of course it is timed to cause the greatest possible embarrassment to Donald Trump. Of course it is timed to wreck a summit meeting, rather not a summit meeting, a meeting between Putin and Trump at Buenos Aires. That is exactly what happened before the Helsinki meeting. It has been done again this time, and there is no doubt whatsoever that the true reason why that meeting has been called off is not because of what happened in the Kerch Strait between Ukraine and Russia. It is because of these political problems that are being artificially created in the United States around this ridiculous investigation, which goes on and on and on, and which is being used, amongst many other things, to prevent a rapprochement between the United States and Russia, as desired by Donald Trump and as promised by him in the presidential election which he won. I have no doubt about this, and I'm sorry to say, because I had some belief in Mueller when he first was appointed special counsel. I've heard various things about him which made me think that he was a man of some experience and professional competence. I'm afraid he has emerged over the last 2 years as a deep swamp, a deep state creature. I say this because by now, long ago, he should have realized that there was no collusion between the between the Trump campaign and the Russians whatsoever, and he's persisting with this investigation, and he's used of the kind of methods that Peter was talking about to try to get people to implicate each other, shows that his agenda is not a legal one, but a purely political one.
And I think also, yeah, the meeting was called off. Not because of machinations of the Ukrainians. I don't believe that for a second. It's a good cover story, but I don't believe it. I actually think that Trump has just given up. I think he's just saying, what's the point? I mean, no matter what he says, he's going to be torn to pieces. Why should he waste his breath on that? So I don't think he thought it was worthwhile at all. Given the magnitude of the problems in that bilateral relationship, as someone explained to me once that had been at a presidential meeting of this magnitude, if it lasts an hour, 20 minutes of it is taken up by the translators, going back and forth. I mean, you really need to have Sherpers, and you really need to have months, and you need to really, these kind of meetings traditionally are when the two guys get together and they sign something after everyone else has done the hard work. So it's kind of pointless right now. And I've said it before in our podcast, just forget about improving relations. It ain't going to happen, okay? Yeah. And Russia's proving that. Because the anti-Russian campaign has not garnered any fruits for the side pushing it. Now they're going directly to challenge Russia on its sovereignty. That's what Kerch was all about, beyond trying to save Poroshenko's regime. The Russians know this very, very well. And I don't know who invented the term, but it was always used regarding South Korea. Russia's just deploying strategic patience. Until the Americans, they're in a fever, and then we have to wait for the fever to break. Hopefully there isn't a war preceding that, okay? So the Russians have no illusions about it. There was nobody was upset it was called off. It's like, well, that figures, okay? They've given up, and have good reason to give up.
All right, Peter, going to your reference to the Kerch Strait incident, what do you make of the recent announcement or the news coming in that Poroshenko will ban Russian males 16 to 60 from entering Ukraine?
Isolating yourself from your most important neighbor and still trade partner, believe it or not, after everything's been said and done. What it is that this is part of the long campaign of the next few months. Poroshenko's got a whiteboard with his buddy, and they got a list of things they're going to do. They already did the Kerch event. Now they're doing martial law. Now they're going to start cutting down on Russians entering the country. And if you look at the martial law the one that was essentially agreed to, instead of for the entire country, it's for just primarily in the East, where there are Russian speakers. There's the Orthodox Church. And where people have been disenfranchised after the coup of February 2014, and talk about democracy promotion. Two among the biggest parties, the Party of Regions and the Communist Party, were banned. Okay, those are the ones that got Yanukovych into power. So you don't like their opinions? Ban their opinions, ban their vote, disenfranchise them. Okay, this is what this is all about. There's a great article in The Nation by Nikolai Petro, a good friend of mine and a frequent guest on Crosstalk. I think it's called Ukraine's Pinochet, and that's exactly what Poroshenko is going to pull. Cracking down on civil liberties, okay, cracking down on the media. And it's pretty cracked down right now, all right? All kinds of sedition laws are in play right now. It's still ain't going to work, because mark my words, you heard it here first. If he loses the presidential election, he will flee the country with his money, okay? And a great deal of his money is in Russia, believe it or not, okay? This is a Ukrainian solution to a Ukrainian problem, folks.
Yeah, this guy's a billionaire, multi-billionaire, and all his money's in Russia, yeah.
Richer as president.
Yeah.
During the course of the presidency.
I mean, Ukrainians have got poorer. Poroshenko has got richer since he became president. I mean, that's something to bear in mind. And on the subject of Pinochet, far more people have died in Ukraine since President Poroshenko became president than died during Pinochet's regime. That is not a defense of Pinochet's regime, which is a very brutal one, which I opposed at the time, but it is simply a statement of fact.
Alexander, President Erdogan wants to talk to Trump at the G20. What do you think he wants to talk to Trump about?
Can you I just missed the question. Could you just
President Erdogan wants to talk to Trump at the G20. What do you think that's about?
He's going to have a huge number of subjects to talk about. He's going to want to talk about Gulen. He's going to go this cleric, this Islamic cleric that he accuses of being responsible for the coup which happened back in 2016. He wants the US to hand him over. There's been some talk that the US may do that. I'm pretty sure that they won't, because I've heard it widely said that Mr. Gulen has many connections in the United States and may even be an intelligence asset. Mr. Erdogan will want to talk about the F-35 fighters. He will talk about Patriot missiles. He will talk about the S-400 missiles that he's buying from Russia. But first, foremost, and above all, he will want to talk about Syria, and he will want to talk about the policy of the United States to build up this Kurdish enclave or mini-state in northeast Syria. And for Turkey, that is an existential issue. It is something that Erdogan is extremely sensitive about. It is something that any Turkish government would be extremely sensitive about. And he will try to impress on Donald Trump the huge unwisdom of persisting with this policy. I don't think the United States is listening.
All right, Peter, from Richie, going back to our Poroshenko discussion, why doesn't Russia sanction Poroshenko and his money?
I don't know the answer to that, because he said that he would liquidate his assets, but he didn't do it at all.
I remember that. Yeah.
I think just kind of common sense. He hasn't broken any laws. I mean, as a business person, people are employed in these plants and whatnot. And I think it allows the Russians to show the glaring hypocrisy of Poroshenko. He owns television stations in Ukraine. He said he was going to sell them. He didn't. Okay. So I don't see the wisdom in that of just seizing someone's property. I mean, you would have to have a good legal reason for that, not just purely spite. It is kind of an odd situation, but if these commercial enterprises haven't broken the law, then why should they be sanctioned? That's what the West does to people. I don't think Russia has an interest in doing that. Quite possibly, just thinking off the top of my head, maybe that's a card they want to keep close to their chest and play it at one time. I don't know. It's a good question.
All right, guys, I will start with Alexander. Who do you think is behind this this recent Poroshenko decision to ban 16 to 60-year-olds? Who do you think was behind the martial law? Do you think this is all Poroshenko's doing, or is this a little bit of the US, a little bit of the EU? What do you think is going on behind the scenes?
Right. I think it is mainly Poroshenko's Poroshenko's doing and the doing of those behind him. I mean, quite likely he has discussed it to some extent with some of his friends amongst the neoconservative groups in Washington and in London, who are basically egging him on and want more and more confrontation, and you only have to read their articles in the newspapers to see that. But if we're talking about the martial law decree that he has imposed, if you look at the reaction in Ukraine itself, it is quite clear that it is seen there, it is perceived there as an attempt by Poroshenko to maintain his power ahead of the election and to manipulate the election. And that, it seems to me, points very much to him himself being behind this thing and driving it. I don't think that US and British governments and Western governments and the EU particularly care whether Poroshenko remains president of Ukraine. I think many of them would be perfectly happy to swap him for Timoshenko, because so long as these kind of politicians remain in charge in Ukraine, underlying policy will not change. So it looks to me more like a personal thing. As for the EU, I should say that they are not happy with Poroshenko's latest moves. If you're looking at the statements that are coming out of Germany at the moment, they're making that absolutely clear.
And Peter, before you answer, there was a question before we started the live on Timoshenko specifically. So before you answer or follow up to Alexander's comments, one of the questions was, if Timoshenko were to become president, What do you think of her? Isn't she worse than Poroshenko when it comes to dealing with Russia?
Her rhetoric is certainly worse. I mean, she even one time said that the Ukrainians should nuke Russia. I mean, remember that one? That was a pretty obviously extreme thing to say. Having said that, and and I'm not a big fan of the gas princess. She is an adroit politician. She actually has a grasp of economics. She could pull a Nixon goes to China. She's the only one that could pull that off, okay? But Alexander Mercouris is right. In this environment right now, any kind of rapprochement with Russia is it just won't have any traction, because you have basically these neo-Nazi, neo-fascist militias keeping an eye on the government, okay? If they make a move like that, then their lives are literally in peril. So this is going to have to play itself out. The more they want to cut off themselves from Russia, there's not the equivalent replacement coming from the West. Okay, fine, they get anti-tank missiles. That's just for purposes of war. But what they need is investment. They need transparency. They need all kinds of things. They need the rule of law. See, the things they're doing now don't really change. I mean, they're rhetorical. They're virtue signaling, but they're not changing the reality on the ground for the average Ukrainian. It's not fixing the economy. And this is my long-standing argument, is that their experiment with this Ukrainianization will fail because it doesn't fix the economy. It doesn't give people a future. It lets them beat on their chest for every once in a while and yell and yap and then ask for help, which, the West knows. I mean, smart people know giving money to the Ukrainians is not really a good idea because it just dissipates instantly, all right? And the IMF knows that, okay? And the post-coup governments they've tied themselves to all of these requirements from the IMF. Even the IMF is saying we're not going to give you any more money until you do X, Y, Z and 1, 2, 3, because all the money just gets wasted. So this is just a festering problem that's going to have to burn itself out, okay? Of course, Ukraine is used as a cudgel to beat Russia from the Atlantic Council and NATO and all of this here. But, the thought of trying to the West militarizing the Black Sea for its own purposes, Turkey will get involved in that also, okay, because they control the straits. And there's a 1936 convention. I think it's the
Montreux Convention.
Montreux, yeah. I mean, you have to deal with that too. I mean, Turkey, and that's another Erdogan card. The guy loves to play the bazaar, okay? But he's not going to want the militarization of the Black Sea. And not at all. I don't even think, and what was it, a day or so ago, Alexander Mercouris said, the British should send more ships. Like, what more ships? Which ones? To do what?
Well, indeed. Oh, I mean, quite. I mean, the fact of the matter is, and I think, I'm not a military expert, but one only has to look at a map to realize that Russia has an overwhelmingly dominant military position in the Black Sea. So sending NATO warships into the Black Sea is provocative, but it is not going to intimidate. The Russians are not going to be frightened by the presence of these ships, and they're not going to make any difference.
I think it was 1988. I'm trying to remember the year, but the U.S. sent some kind of frigate into the Black Sea. And you know what the Russians did? They didn't fire on it. They just harassed it to death and actually bumped up. I've seen the video of it. It's amazing. And it was basically saying, we're not going to shoot you, but get the hell out of here. Okay, you don't belong here. We're not in Lake Michigan, okay? You stay out of the Black Sea.
Alexander, from Jessica, staying on this topic, and this is a broad question, and I would like Peter's take on it as well. Why are so many countries willing to go to war with Russia? Is it just used to scare people? Is it just a scare tactic, or is there something behind it?
Right. First of all, I mean, we must be careful with our use of words. I think very, very few countries are prepared to go to war with Russia. Certainly, Britain is not prepared to go to war with Russia. It's almost one of the most vocal anti-Russian governments, but they're certainly not prepared to go to war with Russia. And in Germany, which I know well, People would be utterly horrified by that kind of idea. We must distinguish between the campaign, the anti-Russian campaign, which we are hearing and seeing, and an actual willingness to go to war. But if you're talking about that campaign, and you're talking about the pervasive anti-Russian campaign that is underway in the West, it serves various purposes. It serves political purposes in these countries, in the sense that it creates a Russian bogey, which enables, it makes it more easy to control political processes in the United States and in Britain and in Europe. It keeps NATO and the EU together in a certain way by identifying a common enemy. But I believe the underlying reason for it is because Russia is a big country, it's a powerful country, and it is a country which is able to say no to the United States and to the West over many things, and repeatedly does. And
Yeah,
especially find that very difficult to accept.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a convenient narrative. First of all, it's familiar. The Cold War, okay, you know, the bad Ruskies, okay. It's a very convenient narrative. Hillary Clinton lost the 2016 election. How could that happen? Oh, it must have been the Russians. Oh, now you have far right and far left in Italy. How could that possibly happen? It must be the Russians. And I could go on and on and on. It's because the West's own failures. Yeah. They must know, because the radical center, the neoliberal center cannot accept that it is wrong on just about everything. And they must, because it's a secular religion for them. It can't fail because it's their God. And they will do everything they can. And they pick on a convenient stereotype, a phobia. You know, you have true believers like Luke Harding, okay? I mean, a certified lunatic, okay? People listen to him about Russia. And I would suggest to all of our viewers, go to, type in Aaron Mate, M-A-T-E, little sign there, and Luke Harding, and you can see a common sense person destroy this collusion delusion narrative. But it works, and I don't think anyone. The Ukrainians would like the U.S. to go to war with Russia. They don't want to do it. Okay. Oh, no way. Okay. That's what. See, this is what America's alliance system has done, and that's why it's so dangerous. Because Washington, go over there. Okay. Nobody wants to take any responsibility. They always say, pull in the Americans, American treasure, American lives. Okay. That's what Israel and Saudi Arabia want to do vis-a-vis Iran. Okay, so the Defense Department in the United States, they don't want to go to war with Russia. They just love the threat of Russia, and they love the threat of China. Okay, defense budgets. Okay, you know, Russia's defense doctrine is it really focuses on what it needs for its defense. The U.S. doesn't say, well, broadly speaking, China's rising. Broadly speaking, the Russians, so give us a whole lot of money, and we'll figure out how to spend it. The Russians do it the other way around. We see, we could be exposed here in our northern flank with missiles coming from that point. We need a specific defense system to protect ourselves. They are very specific. That's why they don't spend nearly as much money, because they don't have to, because they have clearly identified security interests. They are a defensive status quo power.
Alexander, Peter mentioned Luke Harding's article, which is pretty much, I mean, I think it's clear that was fake news. Absolutely. That Paul Manafort met with Assange in 2016. We did a video on this as well. And Politico wrote an article to cover Luke Harding. And what did they say? Russia did it. Russia did it. Yeah. forced the Guardian to publish Luke Harding's, or tricked the Guardian into publishing Luke Harding's article. Yes. Alexander, touch on Luke Harding's article, but more importantly, touch on what's going on with Assange right now as well.
Briefly, I didn't.
Hang on. Luke Harding is somebody's puppet. That's what the conclusion you can draw. We don't know who's pulling the strings, but he's a puppet. Sorry, Alexander.
What I was going to say is, I mean, first of all, Luke Harding's article has disintegrated. I mean, even the Washington Post now is coming up with information that they've checked Manafort's passport in the United States, the police people there, and they can say definitely that he was not in Britain on the days that Luke Harding places him in Britain to visit Julian Assange. And we did a video on this, Alex and I said it's logistically impossible to do that. Now, the Politico article is absolutely, I mean, if Luke Harding's article was crazy, the Politico article was, I think, even a stage beyond that. And we were talking about the anti-Russian paranoia, and Peter was talking about blame Russia for any problem. Well, here you have an example, because, I mean, the fact that Luke Harding wrote an article that is absolute nonsense is not Harding's fault. It's not the Guardian's fault. It's Russia's fault, because they somehow fooled them. Now, Glenn Greenwald has done a brilliant deconstruction of this article on The Intercept, the Politico article. I mean, he actually also did a very, very good one on the original Luke Harding article. And I mean, this is just, I mean, when you see articles like this appearing firstly in The Guardian and then in Politico, you realize the legacy media, mainstream media, is gone seriously wrong. Editing has basically collapsed, as far as I can see. Basic fact checking has disintegrated, and it proves that we are indeed in a witch hunt atmosphere, a paranoid atmosphere, in which any nonsense that is written about Russia is believed. I'm going to add one very last thing. I mean, the animus that The Guardian and Luke Harding in particular have towards Julian Assange is just off the scale. And Luke Harding and The Guardian benefited from Julian Assange's work, but now they've turned on him in such an extraordinary way that it is ugly to see. And the way that they're prepared to publish the most arrant nonsense about him is deeply depressing.
Peter, what's your take?
Yeah, I ditto. And I would just add that there are no consequences in being wrong.
No.
None.
No.
There's no. See, that's one of the sad states of affairs. There's no downside.
No, I mean, that's absolutely true. I mean, all the people who supported the Iraq war, who went on about the WMD, they're still there. They're still churning out, at least in Britain.
And they're still on TV.
Absolutely, they're still churning things out. I mean, Tucker Carlson, in his book Ship of Fools, wrote a brilliant art chapter about this and about Max Boot, who's this extraordinary neocon in the United States. And he shows how, he's consistently wrong about absolutely everything. And there he is. He's still carried. He's still interviewed. He's still treated as this great expert, this great authority on foreign policy and on all sorts of issues. And I mean, this is somebody who is consistently and invariably wrong. And yet, there is no, as Peter says, there are no consequences for this. And the same goes for, especially for commentary about Russia. Real experts, people like Stephen Cohen, are pushed to the margins. Charlatans, and we can name many of them, are now brought into the mainstream and are given authority. As the whole thing has been turned upside down.
And Peter also, Peter Swell's on the chat. Peter Swell says, did you check out Jimmy Dore's hilarious take on Luke Harding's article? Jimmy Dore crushes Luke Harding, crushes The Guardian, and he blasts journalists, Peter, for not sticking up for Assange. I mean, they are torturing this guy. I think RT, I saw on Instagram, even RT posted a photo that Assange's cat, he had to give up his cat, which was, to him, it was a part of humanity for him. It was part of staying. Yes.
He's a pretty lonely guy. I got 3 dogs. Okay, keep me company. No, yes. Last night we made a program, crosstalk on Julian Assange. It's on air today on RT. In a few hours' time, it'll be on YouTube. And we had Joe Loria, which is fantastic. He wrote a book on the 2016 election, and Julian Assange. Julian Assange wrote the foreword for Joe. We also had Gareth Porter, one of the greatest living investigative journalists alive today in the world, And we had our good friend Patrick Henningsen from 21stCenturyWire.com, another real pioneer right now. It's a really good program. I'm very emotional about it because, well, I'm a television journalist, and I see that the vast majority of Western journalists are destroying their own profession, the profession I am in. And they're doing it out of just outrage, prejudice, jealousy, political correctness, ideological possession. There's no reasoning with these people at all. And if Julian Assange, I'm afraid it's not if, it's when, he's tried under the Espionage Act in the United States. That is the ultimate slippery slope. And journalists will regret the day that they didn't support Julian Assange. It doesn't mean you have to like everything he's said or everything that he's done. I don't, all right? But WikiLeaks came into being because the mainstream legacy media failed. And the legacy media has not come to terms with that. And now they are just in lockstep with the state, the deep state. And that is the end of journalism. It's really disgraceful. And what they're doing against him is so against the law from a human rights perspective, from a rule of law perspective. He's a publisher, okay? He didn't write any of this stuff. He's a publisher. And traditionally, under American law, publishers have been given protections. Look at Daniel Ellsberg in 1971 with the Pentagon Papers. They had to drop it. He's a publisher. He published it. He didn't write it. So,
and Richie says that they just watched the Crosstalk show. Very powerful, in my opinion.
Thank you. Thank you.
Alexander, what's your take on what's happening with Assange right now?
Well, I've discussed it, and I mean, I haven't watched the Crosstalk show yet, but I'm sure I will agree with the sentiments that are expressed there. I mean, Julian Assange has been treated in the most hideous way. As I said, he published things which were true. It is important to stress this because, I mean, we've had all kinds of fake stories coming out of The Guardian recently and Politico, but Julian Assange material, the actual material which is published, has always been shown to be true. Clearly, there is very careful fact-checking going on within WikiLeaks. So he publishes things which are true, things which are of huge public importance, things we need to know about what power is doing, things that the media ought to be following up and finding out for us. And what has happened? The weight of three governments, the British government, the Swedish government, and of course the US government, first and foremost, has been turned on him.
Ecuadorian government for.
And the Ecuadorian government now.
And where's the Australian government, Alexander?
And the Australian government has abandoned him, completely abandoned him, even though he is one of their citizens. The media has turned on him. Perhaps most incredible of all, the supposedly left-wing progressive people have turned on him also, whipped into it by an obviously phony rape allegation, which was never ever a criminal charge.
No charge.
That needs to be said clearly, and which in his affidavit he has comprehensively refuted. And of course, he has been accused of being a Russian agent.
That's why he didn't come to Russia. That's why he didn't come here.
On no evidence. I mean, and his human rights, as I recently said on one of our live chats, have been violated in the most grotesque way. And that's not just my opinion; it is the opinion of the of the United Nations body that is supposed to regulate these things. And this is, and this apparently concerns no one in the media. They are all hounding him. And Peter's absolutely right. When you set out to destroy a man like that, a journalist like that, a journalistic organization like that in this way, then you are preparing the ground for far greater control on the media that exists already. I mean, it is a story that is so sinister, so wrong at so many levels that really anybody who cares about the situation in the West and about freedom and about constitution and about due process should be very worried about it.
You know, and what one of the effects of all this could be is that over the 10-year period that WikiLeaks has been exposing the secrets and lies of governments, is WikiLeaks went through it. They verified it. They knew, because when people leak things, they want to. They're doing it out of self-interest. Obviously, you got to make sure that you're not picking sides. And so they went through them, vetted them, made sure they were correct. Others will not do that because that will be done secretly. Okay, well, they will not be as careful and as professional. And see, the thing is something like WikiLeaks, they will continue without Julian Assange, but other people that will want to mimic WikiLeaks, they will not make themselves public. They will stay deep underground, okay? Then you won't even know who is doing it, okay? Again, people in power should be careful what they wish for.
Exactly. I mean, an exposure of something like the My Lai massacre by Seymour Hersh, it is very, very difficult to see it happening now. Because ultimately, what Julian Assange is doing, has been doing, and what WikiLeaks have been doing, is no different from what Seymour Hersh did back then in the 60s. And the same goes for Robert Parry's work on Iran-Contra, for the work that any investigative journalist is doing. But of course, investigative journalism, as it existed, is a dying thing. Julian Assange was the only person who continued with it to any great extent. And of course, he is being destroyed, and the media is helping in his destruction, which to my mind shows that they have just become an accessory to power instead of a check on power, which is what they always claim to be.
You know, the thing is that what you have with journalism today is that their aim is celebrity, money, fame. There are even people that so-called alternative, they still need the recognition and validation from the legacy media because they want to mimic them. And it is a complete betrayal because we do these videos to put, put fire to the feet of those in power. That's the point, okay? And what you do is you get these other people that just do it for money and fame. And, look at Julian Assange is going to, I hate to say it, will probably pay the ultimate price for the decisions that he made. And and his destruction will be done in more or less broad daylight because if he is put on trial, it will probably be a secret trial. And the evidence will be kept secret and a jury will not see it. The defense lawyer won't see it. Julian Assange himself won't see it. And the judge will say, based on these secret pieces of evidence, you're guilty. And then he may be sentenced and we may never, ever hear from him again. And everyone will be watching, standing by, watching the literal disappearance of someone and not lift a finger.
And Peter Knopfler in the chat says, Assange is there to show the public you are powerless. You cannot do anything about it. So Peter, a lot of the people in the chat now are also saying, where is the left on all of this? Where is the liberal left? Where are the progressives? Where are they? A lot of people are saying, where are the progressives on Yemen, on Syria, on Assange? When it's Acosta and something happens at the White House press conference, at the press room, everyone's up in arms. Where are they with Assange? What's going on with the liberal left? Peter, is it all gender pronouns and stuff like that?
It's interesting. To the questioner, for those that had watched my crosstalk on Julian Assange, I asked Patrick Henningsen, and I only gave him like 20 seconds because we run out of time. I said, compared Jim Acosta and Julian Assange, and he almost exploded because he knew he had like 20 seconds. He really wanted to go with that one there, and I think the viewers knew what he wanted to get at. I mean, and the viewers understood the question I was asking. It's a very good question, and I've been asking the same question for many years now. What happened? I thought that the left were civil libertarians. I guess not anymore. All right. The left has completely abandoned its roots, not only the working class, but its ideas. It's adopted identity politics. You don't need to be a deep thinker with that one. Everything is done for you in advance. What they're propagating is a complete abandonment of basic core principles. And I don't throw a whole lot of praise at Republicans. There's some great conservative thinkers out there, and I read the American Conservative every morning, every day. Some really good, smart articles, really smart people, and they have a critique of the left now, and they just say, "What happened to them?" I mean, the most glaring of all is the anti-war left. I mean, remember 2003 in the streets of all of Europe and America? They're all gone.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is the fundamental problem of our time, in my opinion, because my roots are in the left, but I don't see it. I mean, it doesn't exist anywhere. I mean, there are some glimmers of a reawakening in Britain with Jeremy Corbyn becoming leader, but we should not, overstate that. But the left, as a political force, for the first time, since I can remember, has just gone. It's just abolished itself. It's very strange because there are, in my opinion, lots and lots and lots of people out there who are still extremely attracted to its basic ideas. But in Britain today, as I said, the left is focused wholly on identity politics. It is defending the European Union. It has become entirely Atlanticist. It has become all the things that once upon a time it essentially opposed.
What's Corbyn's stance on Assange, Alexander?
He is extremely careful to say as little as possible. And I'm afraid that is a reflection of the political mood in Britain now. If Jeremy Corbyn, who has many problems on many fronts, stood up and spoke out for Assange, it would, I'm afraid, compound his difficulties with his own party. So he has to be extremely careful. But I think that from what I have heard, he is very sympathetic to Assange. And if you want to see Assange, if you want any hope for Assange, that hope has to come in the form of a Corbyn government.
All right, guys, we'll end it with this final question. And we've been going for an hour now and close to 500 viewers. Thank you very much, guys. Go to the Duran shop, buy a t-shirt. It really helps us out. We are not funded by any government. So when you buy a shirt, it supports the show.
You can give us money, though. You can give us money, though.
You can help fund us, and you can also donate to our PayPal and Patreon. And this goes to Peter Lavelle, Alexander Mercouris, and Alex Christoforou. Have any of you thought of entering politics? And on a side note, PM Alexander Mercouris has a nice ring to it. So that's the question. Let's kick it off, Peter. Have you ever thought about entering politics?
Well, I've thought about entering Alexander Mercouris into politics.
Many people have asked this. I mean, Alex will tell you that in Greece, my family have long been involved in politics, and I was asked many times to sort of consider going into politics there. I've always pulled back in the end. It's always been more interesting to me to talk about politics and to analyze it than to actually be involved in politics. Perhaps because I'm too close to politics. My aunt, Melina Mercouris, was a very important politician in Greece, and I saw how she operated politically, and it made me realize that she had certain skills, a skill set, which I don't feel that I fully have, and that I'm more comfortable and are more useful in the end, writing and commenting about it, rather than actually being involved. But the answer is, have I thought about it? Yes, I have done. And have I been approached to do it? Yes, I have been approached to do it, both in Greece and in Britain.
Well, I'm too much of a rabble rouser. No, because you'd have to sell your soul. I don't want to do that. That's not for me. I have the teleprompter on my program, and I have never more. And you know it because you've seen me sitting next to me. I can't read more than 3 or 4 lines because I'm thinking way too fast to read something that's been put in front of me. I actually write all my stuff, okay? But no, I don't read I can't read other people's scripts. I do my own.
And Irish and Tired says, Peter, please be president of Ireland. What do you say, Peter? President of Ireland? It suits you.
Well, those are my origins. I mean, I'm quite a bit Irish, okay, and I do have kind of a nostalgic kind of cultural affection for the Irish. I like to drink too, so I mean, I guess I know where I got it from. So, my mother's maiden name was O'Donnell, okay, and most of my father's background was also Irish. But no, I would love to visit soon, but I think I'll pass on the presidency. Thanks.
All right. Well, people are saying that we all want Peter, and Peter has my vote. All right, Peter, looks like you will be running for Irish president very, very soon.
And I'll still do my crosstalk program from Moscow. Wow, talk about collusion.
Yeah, you could shuttle back and forth, yeah, between Moscow and Dublin. All right, guys, we are a minute over 1 hour. Thank you for joining us on this live chat. And remember, Sunday we have our big live chat. Me, Peter, Alexander, and Mark Sloboda will be on, hopefully, on Sunday to go over a lot of news and to answer your questions. Thank you to everyone who tuned in. We appreciate everything you do for us. Peter, Alexander, anything that you guys would like to say? Anything to look out for in the next day or two before we go on live on Sunday?
Well,
literally a vigil for Julian Assange. It is end days. It is end days. So keep an eye on it.
I think that's right. I mean, we also have to look at the G20 and the situation there. But I think Peter is right. I mean, Assange is for me the really emotional issue, and it's the one I really care about.
Yeah, I agree. They took away his cat. That is about as cruel and inhumane as you can get.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you to everybody. Have a great weekend, and we will see you again on Sunday. Thank you to everyone who tuned in. Take care.